A man called Neto is about to be released today from jail after finishing his sentence for slaughtering and murdering a woman and her baby son. Neto was known for his sadism and showing no mercy to his victim. His best friend, Consular, came to pick him up. He gave him some of his stuff and a smartphone. He told him that his enemies must have been waiting for him after all this time, and he advises him to go to the church to confess all his wrongdoings and repent for all his crimes, but Neto said he would like to meet his son first. Neto stayed at a motel for the time being. While he was tidying his clothes, his car alarm went off, then he went outside to check it. Suddenly, some man wearing a sheriff uniform attacked him. He was lost in number, so he couldn't fight them back. The leader of the sheriff who attacked him then told him that he would never forget what he had done. A flashback of what he did in the past crossed his mind, to the moment when he was savagely slaughtering a woman. The next day, Neto went to his ex-wife's house to meet his son. Her name is Nadia. When she saw him at the door, she was so surprised, and by the look of her face, Nadia did not seem to like his coming. Neto then told her that he came just to see his son, and asked her to let him in even for a while. Nadia then let him in. Julio, Neto's son, was so happy to see his father. He's been missing him a lot. He then showed him his drawing. Julio adored his father a lot. His father was his role model, a hero for him. Shortly after, Nadia came and asked Neto to leave the house, because she was expecting his boyfriend. Before leaving the house, Neto took a picture of his son, as a memory for him. Back at his motel, Neto recalled his past, all the crimes he did. The image of him torturing a woman by stabbing her hands on the table. He did that to her to get the information about her husband. Neto went to the church to confess all his wrongdoing and to repent his crime. He met his old friend there, now a priest of this church. The priest then told him that he saw Julio often and added that Julio was a good boy who admired his father. In the evening, Neto went to a cafe to meet his friend, Billy. He wanted to apologize to Billy and told him that he would like to stop living like a criminal and he wanted to live like a normal person. But Billy said he couldn't stop and couldn't live normally just like others did, because he had too many enemies waiting for him to take revenge on him. He then asked Billy about her ex-wife's new boyfriend, and it turned out, Billy knew him. Billy told him that her ex-wife's boyfriend was a real estate businessman. The next day, Neto went back to his ex-wife's house to get to know more about her boyfriend, and he tailed her car, hoping to find more information about her boyfriend. We got to see a little sneak peek about Nadia's boyfriend, Vincent, who was in the middle of torturing a man. He doesn't seem like a good man. The next day Nadia came to see his boyfriend at his place to ask him a monthly expense that he had not given her yet, and Vincent gave the money by throwing it all in her face while telling her that she was a cheap woman that he dated only for his own pleasure. Neto saw what he did to her from afar, then he left that place while Nadia was collecting the money. When he arrived at the motel, Julio was waiting for him outside the motel. Julio said that he still misses him and said that he wants to live with him, and Neto was happy hearing what his son told him. They talked to each other and Julio showed him his paintings again. All the paintings he made were all about his father, Neto. The next day, Neto got a call from Consular who notified him that he was interrogated by Neto enemies to find out his whereabouts. Neto woke Julio up and told that it was time for him to go home. When they arrived, Nadia was there waiting for them and was so mad at her son for not asking her permission to meet his father. When Neto was having his dinner in the car, he got a message from Nadia. Nadia asked him to leave her and her son alone. Neto agreed to leave her and Julio, but he asked her to meet for the very last time. On the way to meet Nadia, some of his enemies were waiting for him outside, and soon, an intense battle between him and his enemies had begun. Neto made it to take all his enemies down. Shortly after that, Neto met Nadia. He promised to leave her and Julio alone. But it seems that Neto and Nadia still have feelings for each other. They talked about their past memories. At some point their conversation took us to the next scene where they made love in the car. After they made love, Nadia told him not to expect anything from her, even though they just made love. It was nothing. She told him to get out of the car, then left him. It turned out, Vincent's men were there and they saw them. Vincent's men then reported him about what they had just seen. Neto got a phone call from Julio when he arrived at the motel. Julio told him that his mom had been tortured by Vincent. Julio asked him to come as soon as possible. Neto ran immediately to her home, but when he arrived, Nadia had died and Julio was held hostage by Vincent. Neto tried to save his son, but to no avail. Vincent managed to escape and brought Julio with him. Not long after that, the policemen arrived at the scene, and they saw Neto was there. The police then assumed that Neto was involved in this incident. Later on, Neto was picked up by Consular, and he told him that the police were after him because he was the main suspect of Nadia's murderer. But Neto did not care about it, he only thought about how to find and save his son. Consular then informed him that he knew one of the Vincent's friend who might know where Vincent and his son were, and Consular gave his card to Neto so he could find his son. Neto left the town right away to find Vincent's friend that Consular had told him about. He went to a nightclub, hoping to find him. He entered the building and ordered some drinks while observing the situation around the place. A woman came to approach him and offered him company, and Neto wouldn't mind at all. Neto then asked the woman, whose name was Inez, whether she knew about someone by the name Rink. She said she knew that man and asked Neto some money for the information she was about to tell him. Neto gave her the money, and after that she made a phone call to her boss. Her boss came while having a call with Rink on the line. She told him that there was a guy at her nightclub looking for him. After having some chat, the woman finally gave Rink's address to him and Neto went to meet Rink right away. On the way to meet Rink, he was listening to the radio, and he found out that the police were everywhere searching for him. Shortly after, he arrived at Rink's house. A security guard did some checks on him before he was allowed to enter the house. Once he was clear, he was told to come inside the house and Rink was there with his girlfriend that he loved dearly. Rink asked him what was the purpose of his arrival, and Neto told him that he needed to buy some guns from him, knowing that Rink was a firearms dealer. Rink then invited him to his storage room to find a gun that he wanted to buy from him. He took a look around to choose the gun. While choosing the gun, Neto asked Rink whether he knew where Vincent was, and that made Rink realize that his arrival wasn't about buying a gun, but something else. But it was too late. Neto shot the fire at Rink's leg and he also shot his girlfriend cruelly when she was trying to defend herself. Neto asked Rink to tell him where Vincent was, while torturing him, and finally he told him that Vincent was out of town for his business. Once he got the information about Vincent, he then shot Rink to death, took some weapons and money from his safes, then ran out of that place. He went back to the nightclub and met Inez there. But it turned out some of Vincent's men tailed him to the nightclub, and they searched for him in the restroom. The gunfight then happened there and Neto was able to take all Vincent's men down all by himself. After the fight, Neto went back to the bar to ask Inez's help. He asked her to pretend to be his wife, so he could cross the borderline and he would pay her for that. She agreed to do it if he would pay her $1,000 and Neto agreed to pay her that much. Before crossing the borderline, Neto asked Inez if she could show some of her skin to distract the guard's attention from him, and with her working experience, she said that would be so easy. They managed to cross the border safely and they planned to stay the night at a motel. Neto thanked Inez and then told her that he will drive her to the bus station tomorrow. Before going to her room, Inez asked Neto about his purpose for coming to this town, then he told her that he was looking for Vincent who kidnaps his son. Upon hearing that, Inez then said to Neto that she would like to help him, but he should pay her, and Neto accepted her help. Inez went to a real estate site by disguising herself as a buyer who was looking for a house. Inez then called Vincent and made an appointment to see him to talk more about the house she was looking for. The next day, Inez came to see the house and Vincent was there to assist her. Vincent described his business to her, and he seemed to be attracted to her, and then invited her to dinner. Back at the motel, Inez showed Neto some pictures that she managed to take while she was talking to Vincent earlier that day. Neto thanked her for everything she did for him. Later that night, Inez came to Vincent's house to attend Vincent's invitation. She was welcomed by Vincent, who greeted her happily, then invited her to come inside the house. Once they were inside, Vincent gave her some drugs, and she accepted it with pleasure. Once she became drunk and flew, suddenly Vincent slapped her and continued to beat her. It turns out, Vincent knew about her working with Neto all this time. Neto came to Vincent's house once he found out that Inez was in danger. He took all the guards down one by one. Finally, he could enter the house and found Vincent there. He asked Inez to leave the house immediately. Neto managed to hold Vincent captive and planned to give him some lesson by torturing him using the sharp weapons that he had prepared earlier. Before torturing him, Neto asked him where his son was, but Vincent didn't want to answer him. Tired of him for not telling him about his son, Neto then started to torture him. Vincent couldn't stand it, and finally he told him that Julio was with a human trafficker named Sands. Neto was about to leave Vincent, but stopped himself when Vincent insulted his wife. He told him that his wife was the worst whore that he ever met. Neto was so mad by his insult, then decided to kill him. Back to his motel again, Neto told Inez that he was sorry for making her get involved to his affair and made her hurt, but she said that he didn't need to be sorry about that, Because she did this by her own will, no one forced her to do this, then she thanked him for saving her earlier. The next day, they resumed their journey to find Sans, the one who held Julio captivated. The distance was so far, so it took hours to find that place. When they arrived at the town where Sans was, many armed guards were around, so they decided to find a hotel to make a plan on how to save Julio. At the hotel, Neto told Inez to leave the city, since he didn't have enough money to pay her, but she said that she would stay and help him without asking for a payment. They made love to each other later that night, and it turned out both of them had a mutual feeling. The next day, Neto asked her again to leave the city, since he was afraid that she would become a victim. He insisted that she should leave, but she was so adamant to stay with him, but finally, after a lot of argument, she left the city by taxi. Neto then continued his search for Sans. He went to a boxing ring to ask some people how to find Sans, and shortly after, that man notified his boss that there was a guy who was looking for Sans. Inez canceled her trip home, and later on, she joined Neto at the boxing ring. While waiting for the information about Sans, suddenly some men launched the attack right behind Neto's back. Neto was unconscious, and when he was awakened, he found himself in the car with some of Sans' men. Neto managed to take the opportunity to fight back and made it to take all Sans' men down one by one. Neto resumed his search by going to Sans' home base that was located in the middle of the forest. When he arrived there, he saw too many people held captive in secluded rooms. Inez was there too. She was being tortured by Sans' men. His arrival at the home base was finally known by Sans' men, then they caught him and handed him over to Sans. Sans recognized him when he saw Neto, and from this scene we finally know that the woman who had been tortured and killed by Neto at the beginning of this movie was Sans' wife. Not only did he kill his wife, Neto also killed his son. Sans said that he was going to avenge his wife and his son. He then ordered his men to torture Inez and also Julio. Neto was bound and restrained by Sans' men, so he couldn't do anything when he heard the screams of Inez and his son, Julio. Sans hung Julio and sinked him into the well filled with water, and Julio looked so tired and couldn't breathe. Neto couldn't stand it anymore, so he gathered all his strength to fight back. In the end, he could take all the guards down, but unfortunately he was stabbed with a knife by one of Sans' men, but he tried to hold it for the sake of his son's life. He fought all the men alone, and finally could kill all the Sans' men, and in the end he managed to take the knife out his body, then aimed it at Sans. Sans finally died in his hands. With all the strength he had left, he tried to get up to save his son, but it was too late. Julio had already died from being drowned in water. Neto brought his body out of the place, and he deeply regretted that Julio must have endured the torture for all of the sins he had made. He buried his son the next day, and Inez was there to accompany him.